Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. And today we've got a spoiler-free review of Wind and Truth, Book 5 in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I want to clarify before we even get going what I mean when I say spoiler-free. So, this book I will give you guys minor setup, context stuff. I'm going to be talking about which characters are in this book. Nothing where it would be like, in the last 10% X character shows up. If that was to be a thing, I would not talk about it. But I'm going to be talking about things like, for example, Kaladin is in it, etc., etc. So, if that is something that you are sensitive to, because I know that I personally actually don't really like to hear what characters are in sequels, because that tells me, what's going on. I will also be spoiling previous Stormlight Archive books if necessary. In my point of view, if you're watching this review, you probably should have read books 1 through 4 and also the novellas. Although I don't know how much the novellas stuff will come up. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about whether I liked it. We're going to talk about my favourite bits in terms of like character moments and stuff without spoiling. And then I'm going to kind of give you like a bit of a rating and a wrap up for how I felt about the book and how I feel about this as an arc as well, because this is the end of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. So the Stormlight Archive is 10 books, and the first half is one arc and the second half is another, and there's like a time skip in between as well. So let's just dive right into things. So I started this book last week. I used the preview chapters to get a bit of a head start. So Sanderson released for free around 20% of the book, so the first 2 days, and interludes and prologue and stuff. And I read those, and then on launch day, I finished day 2 on launch day, and then started day 3 in the evening. So I did have like a 20% head start. So if you have not finished the book, you're not a slow reader. I, A, really focused on this, and B, had a head start. I finished it last night at 1 a.m. My original plan for this was to finish it yesterday evening, like early evening, and then I was going to do like an instant reaction video. So Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews does this thing where he finishes the book, closes it, puts it down and goes, and I finished reading. Well, he goes, and I am done. That's his like thing. So I was thinking about stealing that idea, but I finished it at 1 a.m. This book is very long. It's the longest book in the Stormlight Archive, I think. It's not the longest book that I have read by like 10 pages, but it is incredibly long. It is 1,329 pages, and there is literally no room in this book for the Ars Arcanum at the end, which is like the in-universe glossary of terms and like Cosmere stuff that Sanderson puts at the end of his books. This book was so long that there was no room for that. So yeah, it's a biggie. There's literally like the final page has the final page is the end of the book, and then the next page is like a little note from Sanderson. Like that's that's how long this book is. But contrary to previous Stormlight Archive books, so I would say that for me, Stormlight Archive is a 3 to 4, mostly 4-star series. Many of the books I feel could have had sections edited, trimmed, or cut. I think Sanderson does this thing with Stormlight Archive where he's like, this is it. This is the most book I'm going to write. It's the most characters, the most world building, the most detailed, and he does not hold back. And in every other book apart from Wind and Truth, I have felt that this has been sort of to the detriment of the book. All of these books are over 1,000 pages. I often think about these books when reading The Wheel of Time, for example. So The Wheel of Time is obviously a much, much longer series, but many of those books are only 600 pages. And I do, like, while 600 pages is a lot, it's a long book, I do feel like books like Way of Kings and especially Rhythm of War could really have benefited from the focus of a restricted page count, so a lower page count. Wind and Truth, I feel, is the best book in the Stormlight archive. It's my favourite. I think it's also, in terms of writing quality, I do believe it's Sanderson's best work. In terms of the quality of the character writing, he actually manages to write some really evocative prose in this. The Sanderson's whole thing is accessibility from his prose. So it isn't like it's going to suddenly become Guy Gavriel Kay or Robin Hobb. However, he does write some really evocative lines in this. He also does some really fantastic alluding to major lines and quotes from previous books, which is something that I really enjoy when you're wrapping up a story. And this is wrapping up that first half of the Stormlight archive. And it's actually, for those of you who are thinking of like, oh my god, this, you know, the next book in this series is not planned to be written for like 5 years, so are we 8 years away from the next Stormlight archive book? Yes, we absolutely could be. However, this ends really satisfyingly. It ends on a point of kind of wrapping up the majority of character stories. So the character arcs all kind of wrap up, whereas the universes and the world of Roshar's story, there is still a lot left to tell. So yeah, really, really satisfied with this one. And I remember I was trying to read it because I wanted to get the review out this week. So purely for having a booktube channel, I wanted to get this review out as soon as possible. And I have to say, as I was reading it, I was like, I almost wish I could slow down until I got to the last two, basically to the Sanderlanche, as it were. This book is split into 10 days. Across each day is like a different section of the book. So if you don't know, previous Stormlight Archive books have been split across 5 parts. So every book has 5 parts, and like the 5th part is basically always the like blowout action ending, whereas Wind and Truth is across 10 days, and there's more. There's like more big moments, I would say, because of this 10-day structure. We have a really fantastic setup here in that because of this restricted 10-day time period, things move a bit quicker. There's a bit less, I don't know the right term. Sanderson doesn't like luxuriate in the minutiae and the details in the same way that he has in previous books. This one, yeah, it's just a really fantastic achievement, I have to say. Based on Rhythm of War, I was not particularly excited for this book. I was excited to read some new Sanderson, and I was excited to revisit Stormlight Archive, but I had felt that Rhythm of War was a big step down from Oathbringer. I'd also thought that Lost Metal was not as good as the previous 3 Mistborn books. And Sunlit Man also was the last kind of big Stormlight archive thing, and that I thought was quite weak. So there was a part of me that was like, have I now, I started my reading journey with Brandon Sanderson. We're coming back to reading fantasy. And I was thinking to myself, have I now read so much fantasy stuff of a much higher quality that it is ruining my enjoyment of Brandon Sanderson, and is maybe... I mean, it's not that these are low quality books at all. Sanderson, in many ways, is writing like big popcorn blockbuster fantasy fiction. And this book is a really, really like cool Avengers like moment. People are saying, oh, this is the Avengers Endgame for the Cosmere, but it isn't. That isn't where we're at. We're at the halfway point for the Cosmere, as far as I'm aware. And so it's more like the first Avengers movie, even, maybe, or like something like that. And this book in particular is quite bombastic. It's definitely a big blockbuster. Like, there's a lot of really strong characterization, probably the strongest that he's done. And I will show my bias here in telling you Mistborn Era 2 is my favourite Cosmere stuff. But I feel like Shadows of Self, the book that was like so dark that Brandon was like, I should maybe take a break from writing this and write something else, or that he felt it was so dark. I think that actually had some of his strongest character stuff. But this really does blow it out of the water. I should probably just tell you guys now, this hasn't been the most organised review video. I'm rating, I haven't actually put it into Goodreads yet, but I will be rating Wind and Truth 5 out of 5. And I do think that, even though, interestingly, I was not particularly hyped for Wind and Truth, as I said earlier, because I felt like, for me, I hadn't read a Sanderson book that had really blown me away in a while. I was not super excited for it, but I do actually think this will probably end up being my number 2 book of the year. And I didn't even think it would be in the top 10. It is much more... I like it as well also, for the same way that I like what is my current number 1, which I won't spoil because my top 10 list is out very soon. But the kind of like more experimental structure, splitting the book across these 10 days, very unlike the previous Stormlight books, which all take place over, weeks and months. Yeah, it's a really, really interesting. I say really, really interesting. It's a really great book, and the ride is really good. You do feel like you're kind of like holding on while you barrel through this story. Sanderson does something that he normally reserves for like the finales of these books. So in the finale of most of his books, he will swap POVs. So within chapters. So usually a chapter is a single POV. However, in the like big monumental finale chapters, the Sanderlanches, he will often have like, this chapter is a battle and we're following all the POVs through it, and we'll swap POVs. And Sanderson actually does that throughout the book. So very, very early on, he is doing multiple POVs per chapter and swapping back and forth sometimes around scenes, which I really, really liked. And it made the pacing much, much stronger. I felt like the cruft had the chaff, as it were, has really been trimmed out of this book, mostly because it would have just been too long otherwise. But all of the storylines in this book I really resonated with. So we have Adeline, who is fighting he's kind of trying to defend. He's trying to defend somewhere against insurmountable odds. We have Kaladin, who is journeying with Zeth to his homeland, Shinovar, and Zeth is kind of on this pilgrimage, and Kaladin is there to try and save his soul, as it were. So, like, after Kaladin going through what he went through in Rhythm of War, where he really came to a head with his own mental health and had to work through it in order to save everyone, Zeth is now trying to save his homeland, and is Kaladin is trying to save Zeth, and then Dalinar is trying to, power himself up in order to become a champion worthy or powerful enough to defeat Odium. And then Shallan is Shallan and Renarin and Relaine as well, actually, are on their own kind of side quest in a Shadesmar-like realm. And I won't go too far into that. Almost all of this stuff is set up in like the first day or two. So anyone who's read, 10% of this book will know all of that set up. And there's a lot of that is on the back as well. But what I want to talk about is that really everyone's arc in this book is very satisfying. Sanderson does this thing where he says that if you're paying attention, you should be able to see the reveals coming. You should be able to guess the reveals because of the way that he writes the books. And there were still a few sections that were genuine surprises. There were outcomes that I was expecting for the characters that they didn't come to. There was some really, really nice character moments in this book. Renarin and Relaine get some really good story moments in their shared story sections. I really, really liked Zeth's flashbacks. I really, really liked Venli's flashbacks in Rhythm of War. I'm like the only Venli fan. And I really, really like her. I really like her, like, struggle between the, like, Odium, who is going to, get rid of the humans that have oppressed the listeners for so long. However, the way that he's doing it is destroying the listeners and destroying their culture and enslaving them almost. So it's kind of where she thinks that's what she wants, and then suddenly she realizes, no, actually, I was very wrong. I've doomed our people, and her kind of comeback across the books has been really, really good, and I really liked her story in Rhythm of War. Weirdly, that's the part that people seem to hate the most, is like the Venli present day stuff and the Venli flashbacks. But those were my favourite parts of Rhythm of War, and my least favourite parts were the Kaladin stuff. I thought there were some great moments in Rhythm of War, but the overall, the Kaladin story didn't quite hit for me. Yasna is also in Wind and Truth. She doesn't get as much page time as I would like. I'm a big fan of her character, and I really liked the few focused story moments that we had with her, but I do wish we had a little bit more. We didn't spend much time with Dalinar either, which is quite fun, seeing as he's on the cover. Although that's kind of happened with previous Stormlight books, where like a person will be on the cover and then they won't actually be that much in the book, like Yasna's on the cover of Oathbringer, for example. Trying to think what's interesting to talk about. There was a lot of diving into history in this book. So previous books have had a lot of flashbacks, but this book has a lot of characters trying to like go over their own past and work through it. So we have Shallan, who has kind of reconciled a lot of her pain and her hidden memories. So she was hiding her memories from herself of things that she has done in the past. And she's now, she knows everything. She's reconciled a lot of her alternate personalities. However, this book, she is kind of trying to reorganize her life and who she is outside of this sort of stuff. We've also got Adeline, who is like kind of wondering what his place is as a sword fighter in a world of superhumans. Very, very good storyline. I think Adeline may have ended up being the best story in this book. Actually, no, the Zeth and Kaladin one is fantastic too. And Zeth and Kaladin's one is, a lot of that is dealing with Zeth being like exiled for being truthless from his homeland, and like finding out why he was really exiled, what was going on, and what has like shrouded the country for the time that he's been away, and even before that. And Kaladin's story is fantastic too, kind of coming out of this period of depression and PTSD and trying to figure out who he is without being a soldier, which I thought was really smart and really fascinating. Yeah, I really liked Kaladin in this book as well. I say that, I liked all of the characters. I think the real standouts for me again were Zeth, Kaladin, and Adeline. And then I like Shallan, weirdly, has been my favourite character through the series, but I feel like in this final book, she doesn't take a back seat, but a lot of her big story moments are in the past. So she has some really big moments in books 1, 2, and 4, but in this book, less so much. One interesting thing that I want to talk about here before we close this video out is Cosmere connectivity. So a lot of people talk about the Cosmere as if you have to be like an obsessive. You have to read everything, that these books are no longer for casual readers. And there's a really interesting thing with this one where Sanderson said with the Lost Metal forwards. So Lost Metal was it last year's book? The year before? Whatever, whenever it came out. He said that from the Lost Metal forwards, he was going to be gloves off. He assumes you've read everything. Everything's going to be really connected with other stuff in the Cosmere. He's not just going to be like, it's a Stormlight Archive book, so it's going to reference other stories, characters, and events from the Stormlight Archive. He's going to, reference loads of other stuff. And I have to say, if this is his idea of the gloves are off, the difference is minimal. Very, very minimal to when he is saying the gloves are on. The Cosmere, you could read the whole of the Stormlight Archive, nothing outside of the Stormlight Archive, and completely understand everything in this book apart from 2 or 3 terms and references. There is a section where one of the characters says the word Faruka Mist, and like, if you hadn't read Mistborn, you might not know what that is, but you could literally just Google it and it would tell you. I don't think there's anything in this book that you could not Google and get the idea of what's happening without spoiling yourself. So obviously you can look up anything on the Coppermind, right, which is Sanderson's wiki, but like usually looking at things on the Coppermind will spoil you on those things. But because most of the Cosmere connectivity in this is like terms, characters, and I say characters, I mean like 2 characters, really this book is actually very, very self-contained. Self-contained is kind of the wrong term, but it's as self-contained as you can get with a book like this. So if you haven't read everything in the Cosmere, absolutely don't worry, you don't have to. The things that people have been saying in the lead up to this, that, you should make sure you've read Sunlit Man, absolutely, that's not categorically not true. Reading Sunlit Man would allow you to maybe twig like 2 small things, but I actually would probably say read it after. I would read Wind and Truth before Sunlit Man, honestly. And you don't have to have read... I mean, I would say maybe you should read Mistborn Era 1, Mistborn Secret History, Elantris, Warbreaker, and Stormlight Archive. So a lot of Sanderson books you could cut. And when I'm saying read those are optional extras. Warbreaker might be the only one that I think it's important to have read, but that's important to have read before you read other Stormlight Archive books, not this particular one. I would say you need to have read Warbreaker before Stormlight Archive, really. But other than that, most things are pretty much explainable or understandable with 10 seconds of Googling. So, yeah, don't be scared off this book. Don't be scared off this series. You could be scared off because of the mega length. Like, I understand that. But you don't need to be scared off because you have to have read 20 other books. You genuinely don't. You can enjoy this series pretty much standalone by itself. Aside, as I say, from Warbreaker, the content of Warbreaker that is referenced in these books is explained in these books, but it's better if you've read them. Does that make sense? There's context clues for everything, even for like stuff that's happened in previous books. They'll tell you, like Sanderson will tell you if you need to know something. He does not rely on you remembering something to understand a story point. Hopefully that has made sense. I've gone on for quite a long time about that. And in fact, now's probably a great time to wrap this video up. So I want to let you guys know, if you're interested in spoiler thoughts on this, I have recorded videos on that too. So my friend Andre and I are doing full spoiler discussions. We're splitting it by day. So we did day 1 and 2 and the prologue and the interludes together. Then we have recorded day 3 earlier today. So we hope to record day 3 and 4, but we had so much to talk about with day 3 that we actually didn't get to day 4 before my time ran out. So we've ended up with just doing day 3. We may be doing a day per episode. We may double up some episodes. I honestly don't know. But we'll do as many as we can. And we'll be covering the whole book, and it should be out by the end of the month. So if you're reading along, you'll be able to watch each particular video, and hopefully that will be a great time for you. If you've read Wind and Truth, let me know down below what you thought of it. I would suggest you keep these spoiler light, but honestly, if you have not read this book, I would just not go down to the comments. If you have liked this video, please give this video a like on YouTube. And of course, subscribe to the channel to join the community and be notified when my Stormlight Archive spoiler chats go up, if that sounds like something you'd be interested in watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will speak to you tomorrow.